Welcome to The American Dream with Viktoria Bloomberg, Bloomrich Law Firm.
Hello and welcome to The American Dream with Viktoria Bloomberg of Bloomrich Law Firm. Viktoria is experienced in immigration law and with assisting individuals and businesses with immigration to the U.S. She provides a comprehensive range of immigration services, including helping clients with U.S. visas, green cards, and other immigration-related matters. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is Family Immigration for Those Who Have Relatives in the U.S. Hey, Viktoria, how you doing?
Good. Hi, Kevin. Thank you for having me today here.
Absolutely. It's great to see you. So can you tell the listeners a bit about yourself and why family immigration is so important to you?
So my name is Viktoria Bloomberg. I'm founder and a managing attorney of Bloomrich Law Firm. And family immigration is one of our expertise because, well, first of all, I'm an immigrant myself. I went through immigration process myself. So I do know how our clients feel when their loved ones are abroad and they want them to immigrate to the United States. So I understand that the family connection, how important it is to keep the family together. So the process of the family immigration differs a lot from employment or other types of immigration processes. As I said, emotions of our clients are completely different. So I do love doing family immigration because the care that our clients experience, the care that they exhibit towards their loved ones is something amazing. And we always learn something from our clients in that regard.
Yeah, I'll bet. So what exactly is considered family-based immigration? How does it differ from other types of immigration processes?
So family immigration is basically the type of immigration where one family member, either U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, is in the United States, and he or she wants to bring their spouse, child, or sometimes even sisters, brothers to the United States, or parents. So the lawful permanent resident or the U.S. citizen, they petition for their relative abroad. In employment-based immigration, usually it's employer who sponsors an employee. But in family immigration, it's family member who sponsors their relatives.
Okay.
In order to sponsor, as I said, you have to be either U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident. And depending on who you are, there are options who you can sponsor. I'll give an example. For example, lawful permanent residents cannot sponsor their parents. They can sponsor their spouses and children. Whereas the U.S. citizens do have right to sponsor their parents. So depending on your status in the United States, you may be eligible to sponsor either one or another relative.
Okay, that's interesting. So, who qualifies as a family member under U.S. immigration law? What are there more categories? How does all that work? That sounds like there's a lot of moving parts there.
Oh, yes. Sometimes even immigration attorneys have issues and have to look it up to make sure that whoever client sponsors, they can sponsor this. So basically, there are two categories. Let's divide them to two big categories. First is immediate relatives, and second one is preference categories. So immediate relatives are parents and spouses of U.S. citizens. Those do not require immediate relatives because there is no wait time for them to immigrate, basically. So the process goes much faster than with other types of categories. I'll give an example again. If, for example, you're a U.S. citizen and you want to sponsor your spouse and your spouse is in the United States, then you can file the whole application, including the green card application, including the petition for the relative all together. You don't need to wait. So you file it all together with Immigration Service, and usually we see the result or green card within 6 to 12 months. So the process is pretty fast for immediate relatives. There is no caps on the amount of visas that are available. So that's also important. That's why there is no wait time. So the preference categories is where, I'll give an example again, lawful permanent resident wants to bring his children to the United States. Then the number of visas that are available for this category is limited. That is why the children will have to wait longer to get their immigrant visas and come to the United States because the number of the available visas is limited. Also, we should think about the country. So sometimes the United States or Department of State of the United States put some limitation on the country eligibility. Some countries, for example, China, usually is overbooked, let's say that way. And people from Chinese citizens have to wait longer in order to get their visas, immigrant visas to the United States. So depending on all those parts, the citizenship, who you're sponsoring, what preference, what category. From that, we can see how long time it will take, what is the process, etc. The wait time right now, I would say, again, for the non-preferential, for immediate relatives, is about 6 to 12 months. It's very fast. And for, let's say, the fourth category, which is sisters and brothers of US citizens, those can wait up to 20 years. So the process is really long, depending on which category you fit in.
At what point is it just easier for them to try to do it on their own than not? You know what I mean? Like because it doesn't take that long as a general rule if you want to try to immigrate here for other reasons, right?
Right. So if you do want to immigrate through employer, for example, through EB1, EB2, EB3 types of visas, the process can be much faster. It can be anywhere between, again, 1 year to probably 5 years, maybe 6, but it's certainly not 20 years.
Wow, 20 years is a long time.
It is. Backlogs, US Department of State is very busy, and the USCIS is very busy. And again, the number of visas is limited. So because of the limitation on the number of green cards.
That's a good point too. The number's limited. Yeah. That obviously factors in. What are the general steps involved for someone looking to sponsor a relative for U.S. immigration?
So the first step is to understand whether you're eligible to sponsor. When the client comes to us, my job is to evaluate what is needed, what we don't have yet, and how much time it will take for the client to obtain it. I'll give an example. Sometimes clients come to us and we have to evaluate whether you're a US citizen or a lawful permanent resident. That's all right. That can be done within 2 minutes. But then the question is whether you're financially able to sponsor your relative or whether you will need a joint sponsor. So there are situations sometimes when the person doesn't have enough income and we cannot show that he will be eligible to be a sponsor. So in that case, we will need to use a joint sponsor. So these are the first steps to understand the eligibility. The second step is to file an application. Here we will have to file Form I-130, petition for alien relative. That's what it's called. In this petition, we're showing the relationship between the sponsor, petitioner, and the immigrant. So the relationship, again, could be mother, daughter, could be brother and the US citizen. So parents, spouses, sisters, brothers. So we show this relationship, and that's the second step, basically. So we file an application, show this step. If USCIS is happy with what was submitted, then they will issue an approval. Once we have an approval, then we can move forward with the second step, and that's already consular processing, so-called consular processing, or adjustment of status, depending on where the person is, in the United States or abroad. If the person is abroad, the person will have to go through medical examination. Medical examination usually is done by the certified doctors. These doctors are usually approved by the Department of State or by USCIS, Department of Homeland Security. It doesn't take much time, probably about a week or 2 weeks to obtain the medical examination. But sometimes there are issues. Sometimes people didn't even know they have some issues with their health. So that really delay the process. Yes. We also had one situation with our client who traveled recently actually to over 20 countries and stayed in over 20 countries for more than 6 months. And we needed to obtain police certificates from each country where the person stayed for over 6 months.
But that was easy.
But that did delay the process by about 2 months. So we have to take into account all these possible delays that can happen in the process. And consular officer, when he or she reviews the documents, they don't necessarily will ask you for police certificates. Sometimes they don't, but you got to be ready for. You
got to be prepared. Yeah. You don't want to be asked that and not have it.
Correct. So in the case we did prepare all the police certificates where the person was abroad for a year, which is required by law. But the officer started asking the beneficiary, the immigrant, for other certificates where the person stayed less than a year for over 6 months. And that was a bit of a question for us because we wanted to ask the officer, why are you asking that? But if we did ask, then the officer does have a leeway. They do have discretion. They have right to ask for more. So then we had to go back and to go over all the police certificates in all the countries, which was a hassle. But it was done, and the person is now in the United States, reunited with the family members. So that is great, but it did delay the process. So my view of the whole thing is that the consular processing is the hardest part in all this immigration, family-based immigration, because the officer has a lot of power to request the documents. And sometimes we either know in advance what we need, we can anticipate what we may need, but sometimes it goes beyond what was expected from our standpoint, from the attorneys. Again, it depends on the client's history. So if you do have a complicated history of travels or criminal records, please make sure to let your attorney know in advance so that we know what we will need for the interview.
Yeah, makes sense for sure. Does the process differ if the relative is inside or outside the U.S.?
Yes, the process is different because if the person is in the United States, if the relative is in the United States, we will not need to go through consular processing, which makes things much easier for me as an attorney and for the clients too, because there is more control here in the United States. We know what we're dealing with. We have more control over this specific, not control over the agency, but control over what is happening here on the ground. So if you're abroad, you have to go through consular processing. That means that you will need to fill out the form DS-260. This form is, oh my God, very detailed. So make sure that you respond to all the questions accurately. Try not to make mistakes, and be ready to include all your addresses since you were 18 years old where you lived, even if you lived somewhere briefly. Sometimes that entails, 30 addresses, because sometimes people immigrate at the age of 50. So they lived in over 30 places. Just make sure that you provide detailed information and you fill out everything correctly, because even small mistakes sometimes can lead to bigger issues. So make sure that you are providing everything. And one more note I'm going to make here. DS-260 does ask a question. Have you ever used other names? So even if your mother or father or someone called you a bit different name, my suggestion is to include that just in case. Even if it was used within your family.
Even if it's like a nickname?
It doesn't matter. Yes, it's better to include all the names that you used. It's not like legal names. It's everything, every name that you've ever used, not necessarily legal name.
Interesting. All right. My buddies have called me some weird stuff sometimes. I'm not sure if I would include that, but.
Right. So another thing is that if you're in the United States, then you will be filing adjustment of status application. And with adjustment of status, you have to be very careful on the timing. So as we mentioned, there is a backlog of visas, and there's a document that's issued monthly. It's called Visa Bulletin. It's issued by the Department of State. And when you're filing your adjustment of status, you have to make sure that the timing of your adjustment of status corresponds with the timing that's allowed for you to file the application. You can't just file any day, anytime, whenever you want. You have to make sure that your priority date is current. The U.S. Department of State allows you to file your application this month. Because if it doesn't allow you to file application this month, then it will be denied. Then you may end up being out of status in the United States. So you have to make sure that the timing is correct and that you're allowed to file that adjustment of status application, meaning green card application.
And how does the U.S. immigration system prioritize family-based immigration cases? Are there significant differences between immediate relatives and extended family members in terms of eligibility?
Yes. As we mentioned, when we're filing for immediate relatives, applications for immediate relatives, they can file the application together with the green card application.
Okay.
So that is the biggest benefit of being an immediate relative. Another thing, don't tell anyone, it's a secret.
Okay, I won't. Everybody who's listening, don't tell anyone either.
Yes. There are things that are forgiven or can be forgiven to immediate relatives. I'll give an example. If you overstayed your visa, overstayed your status, I do not recommend doing that to anyone, okay? But if you did overstay and your spouse is filing for you and your spouse is a U.S. citizen and your citizen is filing application for your green card, the unauthorized stay, this time that you were out of status, will be forgiven to you.
Okay.
So that's a benefit. Another thing, if you worked without authorization, it will also be forgiven to you. But it only applies to immediate family members of U.S. citizens. So only to U.S. citizens and immediate families.
Okay.
So that is the priority. That is the benefit of the.
But don't say anything.
Don't say anything.
Okay, I won't. What are some of the most common challenges or mistakes that people make when applying for family-based immigration? And what is your advice on how to avoid those?
Well, sometimes people forget including the birth certificates that show the family relationships. So they just assume that US government knows that they have to prove the relationship, especially if it concerns brothers and sisters. They just forget to include their birth certificates showing mother and father as the same. Also, if Immigration Service finds that something is missing, they will send you a request for evidence called RFE, request for evidence. Don't be scared. Don't just freak out and be like, oh my God, something is bad happening. No, it's just Immigration Service telling you, hey, you're missing something. Please provide that document to us. So deadlines. Immigration Service in this RFE, request for evidence, will tell you until what time do they expect the documents from you. Make sure do not miss that deadline. If you don't understand what Immigration Service asks you, please hire an attorney to respond to that request for evidence, and make sure that your attorney responds to the RFE prior to the deadline. And I'm not saying call your attorney every day of the week. I'm saying just make sure that your file was submitted prior to the deadline, because missing the deadline is another thing that happens. And I see that a lot.
Yeah.
So just make sure that you don't miss the deadline. Visa bulletin. Sometimes people file their adjustment of status application too late or too early. And usually it's too early and the application is being denied, and it's being denied not right away. Sometimes it's being denied later. And people already paid the fees, the government fees for the filings. They now lost their money and lost the time. So that's another matter that happens sometimes, mistake.
Yeah, that's no fun. All right, well, looking ahead, obviously lots changed in this country over the past few weeks. Do you foresee potential changes to family immigration process in the near future that might affect families trying to reunite here in the US?
I personally don't foresee in visa process or the petitions process any changes. I think that the new incoming administration is more concerned with the immigrants that are in the United States out of status, rather than the reuniting the family through visa process, consular process, adjustment of status process. That being said, there are some news and there are some stories that are saying that the birthright will be, the citizenship by birth will be abandoned, and that it will no longer be possible, because we do know that a lot of people are coming to the United States to give birth in the United States so that their baby obtains the citizenship. That is not legal. It's not allowed by law. But the Trump administration did mention that they may try to implement the rule that will not allow people to receive a citizenship. Not people, but the babies receive citizenship.
Right.
But if they will need to do that, they will need to amend the Constitution. So I think that will not fly. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think the amendment of the Constitution will be obtained. So I don't think that family immigration per se will suffer, or I do not anticipate any big changes in family law. In family immigration.
In family immigration specifically, yeah. Well, fascinating stuff. Thank you for tuning in to The American Dream with Viktoria Bloomberg of Bloomrich Law Firm. To connect with Viktoria, head to bloomrich.com, and please like and subscribe to our channel and leave us a review in the comments if you liked what you heard. Viktoria, thanks so much for being here again. That was a great episode. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.